Grab your coffee and join me, Nicoa, for a caffeinated conversation about life. I'll be talking to people who have chosen to walk their own paths and, just like me, are creating a life by design. I hope it will give you the inspiration you need to do exactly the same. Okay, hey everybody, welcome to Coffee with Nicoa. I've got someone that is a superstar in the world that I have no idea what she's done in her life, what we're going to talk about, but I know that she's got a lot of people that love her. So I would like to welcome Devon Keeler to the podcast today.
Hey, Nicoa. Thank you so much for having me. I, to be honest, have been really excited about this, even though it kind of came together super last minute finally after the 3 times we've tried to do this.
You know, I was laughing. I looked back at the original email. You were texting with me. You're like, what do you want to talk about? I was like, did I not send you an email? And then I was like, oh my God, do you know it's been May of 2023? And so right now we're talking in October of 2024. That's when I originally invited you. So that's hilarious. It took us this long.
Well, and then
it's completely different.
I know. I was going to say total 180 from the initial first time we tried to do it. And then even from, so I feel like we tried to set it up when I was in Hawaii over the summer, and then that kind of fell through and everything. Right. And so I mean, I'm in a different city now. I've got new things going on with my job. So it's just all the changes, but it happened when it was meant to happen.
Absolutely. I believe in divine timing. And I love that you have made so many life changes, because I think that was the original reason that both your mother and quote unquote Aunt Laura both encouraged me to talk with you. So for those listening, maybe those of you who may have not listened to all of the podcast episodes yet, which was really unbelievable. I can't believe you haven't, but
shots fired.
And I'm calling you. I know. Devon. So let me just reference real quick and then I'll give you a hard time.
Yeah.
So season 1, episode 2 is your mother, Caroline Keeler, who we had a phenomenal conversation about her work and her life and all of the twists and turns and decision making that she made over her decades, and most proudly having you. And then your Aunt Laura and a lot of the traumas and dramas that happened in her life, and a lot of insights and encouragement for people going through hard times, especially around the concepts of addiction. So Caroline's episode, if anybody needs to pause first to put this in context, is season 1, episode 2. And Laura Solomon's is season 1, episode 15. So make note, everybody. They are 2 of the wonderful female role models in your life.
They most certainly are. And I think it's kind of funny. I was actually, my head was going through all these ideas last night as I was like, all the things that, I hope come up, or whatever we can talk about. And one of them most certainly was kind of that, I feel like a lot of the big people that I look up to in my life are women, and very strong, very independent, very driven women. And I'm like, got it from somewhere.
You definitely did. And they are really phenomenal women that I'm really honored to be friends with too. And so why don't we just talk a little bit about who you are and maybe give us a quick little context of your life. And then I want to reflect back on some of those past twists and turns that you've had that have helped you get to where you are today. So quick overview. How about that?
Yeah, right. The Cliff Notes.
And then we'll dive deep.
I guess, where did it all start? I was born in Michigan. Grew up kind of a northern kid, and my mom and I moved to the Virgin Islands also when I was 3.5 or 4 or something like that. Lived there for a few years. And I really feel like that time, especially, child development and that kind of thing, really I see a lot of the things that are important to who I am now stemming from the time that we spent there. And it was also interesting as I was in Hawaii recently that I noticed a lot of that coming back up, kind of that island life and all of that. And I was like, these are the parts of me that I love the most kind of came from that, and the bits of my personality and all of that. So I think that's sort of a theme, I'm still at heart sort of this feral little island kid running around just doing whatever she wants.
I love that. And being in Wilmington helped too, I'm sure. So did you live long in Wilmington at all, or just come back when your mom was here?
Yeah, so I actually moved to Wilmington first. But so the geography story here was that we lived in the Virgin Islands for a little while, then moved back to Michigan for like elementary, high school. And then I moved to Wilmington when I went to college. So I was super into marine biology, really thought that I was going to, go into academia, like run my own research lab. I was pretty hardcore that's what I wanted to do with my career. So we'll talk about that a little bit when we get into kind of the life changes and stuff, and how that is very much not where I'm at now.
Right.
But so, kind of had that idea in my head, and that really drove a lot of my sort of early career decision making. And then after I moved to Wilmington, Mom moved there, I think 2 years after I did, a year or two. I can't remember the exact timing.
Yeah.
But so then we were both in Wilmington for about, I was there for 13 years. So she was there for a little bit.
Okay. So you got your beach life here as well, and that island life, even though we got bridges, but
yeah.
No,
sure.
So go back though and talk a little. Let's go ahead and talk about those twists and turns. And I forgot to give you shit that you had not listened to the entire episodes of your quote unquote Aunt Laura or your mother's. I should just stop the interview right now. You are totally in violation of podcast rules.
I know. And even with how many times that we tried to get this started and I still never made it.
So everybody, this is a highlight that, obviously the podcast is so good that she couldn't watch.
I used to religiously listen to the things that you posted on Instagram when Coffee with Nicoa was on Instagram. It was
that's right.
On Sunday mornings, I used to listen to it it was okay, it's up, I gotta go see it. And Mom and I
listen
to it together and talk about the things that you said together afterwards. So I did go through a phase of being a very committed listener.
I remember that. Yeah, your mom would text me afterwards and tell me that y'all had shared coffee and listened. That made me feel really happy that y'all did that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm not, I did a little bit of homework before this, but not a whole lot.
I know. Me either. I don't even think I'm following you on Instagram. Sorry.
It's okay. It's not that interesting these days.
I must have, though. I saw something on your story the other day, and I got confused as to where you were. So you're now. So okay, I'm all over the place too. So before we go back to some of those pivots and turns, I want to just highlight that you currently work for a company. I don't know if you knew this, but I used to work for Thermo Fisher Scientific.
I did know that. Yep.
So we're now buddies. Now we can. That's right. So you were with PPD here. Is that right? Before moving to Durham.
Well, so technically,
so
still because PPD got acquired by Thermo Fisher, it's still kind of technically PPD. They just renamed it the Clinical Research Group within Thermo Fisher. So we're still, kind of going through a lot of the transition stuff and kind of merging with their policies and all of that.
Hey guys, we interrupt this regularly scheduled caffeinated conversation to fuel your ongoing coffee addiction. I have the owner and CEO of Wilmington Coffee Roasters here with me, Travis Parmalu.
I'm so honored to not only be a Coffee with Nicoa guest, but also a new sponsor. I love coffee, so I founded Wilmington Coffee Roasters in 2020 to share it with the world. If you want the best coffee of your life, head right on over to wilmingtoncoffeeroasters.com. And if you still happen to be listening, be sure to use coupon code Coffee with Nicoa, all one word, for a nifty 10% off at checkout.
Thank you, Travis. And everybody, after you buy your coffee, don't forget to follow Wilmington Coffee Roasters on Facebook and Instagram. Now, back to your regularly scheduled caffeinated conversation. Yeah, integrations take a long time. That was my main role there, was a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So I feel for you. It does take a while. So yes. So you work for Thermo Fisher. Okay, so that's part of the integration. I can't stop wearing my HR hat.
I know. Smash me on the branding.
I know. Well, when I got there, we actually changed the branding. It had been in a company for 50 years with all of the acquired companies all across the globe that had never branded. So my job not mine, but our team's job was to really fully integrate that brand. And that was one of the hardest things that you can ever do. It is so hard for people to let go of their original brand.
100%.
So yeah, tell me about that. Tell me how that's going.
Well, I feel like for me, it's not a huge deal because I technically joined PPD after the acquisition happened. So they were already in the phase of kind of like turning things over. And as much as like I'd heard things about like historic PPD, that was, phenomenal feedback and all of that. And for the most part, a lot of that still exists, and they've kind of allowed us to still continue some of the culture of it. But just
good,
like with renaming some things and all of that. But hold on, bring me.
What's your job there?
Original question.
That's right. Yeah. What's your job there? Tell us a little bit about what keeps you busy.
Yeah. So I work in the clinical research group where basically my department is in charge of kind of strategic planning for clinical trials. So we're a lot of like the front end activities where we're putting together where it makes sense to run the trial, how many sites they're going to need, potentially what enrollment for like the specific patient population is going to look like. And then we also do some like risk analysis type stuff and connect them with the resources that will be able to help sort of mitigate those from the very beginning.
And why do you like that job? Why do you do that work?
Yeah. For one, I absolutely love my job. Like, it kind of took me a little while to get here. I feel like for a lot of people who work in the industry, they've been there for a while. I am a little bit young for my role for the most part. And I absolutely am in love with my job because it's like a puzzle every single day. That, no clinical trial is ever going to be exactly the same, and no sponsor is the same. They all have different expectations. It's different teams that you're working with. And I don't know. I like the fact that I get to kind of like put together all these moving pieces and make it tell a story that makes sense. So I think...
So is that... It's purpose driven for you too. It's something that it's a skill that you like and you enjoy. What is the ultimate? I mean, so these are the types of questions I wish somebody had asked me back in the day.
Yeah.
When I started working. So, so why do you like that? Like, why do you like putting all the puzzles?
With my purpose?
Yeah.
Well, for one, like I mentioned, I always really loved the concept of kind of contributing to research. I didn't really know, way back when I was going to college that I really wanted it to be any specific kind of research. So that's kind of what drove me into the whole, like data science. It's a lot of what I do is data driven. So like we're looking at historic trends and kind of trying to project things into the future, which, there's some science to it. There's some art to it. There's some business to it also. Like we have to, pitch certain things and all of that. But I think what brought me into the role that I'm in now is, it's in oncology. So we work with cancer trials for the most part. And my aunt, not the Aunt Laura that you mentioned, but we lost my aunt to breast cancer a couple of years ago. And so that was really sort of, like there have been a lot of turning points in my life, I think, that brought me here, but that was one of the really big ones that really made me kind of examine what I was doing with my life. And was it really what I wanted? Like, how did I want to be making my impact? And so that it was actually a debate that I had when I was taking the offer for this job, because this one was in oncology and the other one was not specific to oncology. And it was to the week right around the anniversary of when she passed. And so I was like, if this isn't, a sign to kind of examine what I might be able to learn from this and how it aligns with the bigger picture things that I want in my life. So I think that's a big part of that story for me too, is that, we're working with cutting edge medicines every single day.
I think that's, first of all, I know that was a really hard time for you and your mom, and I'm so sorry for your loss. And yet the timing of the offer, it's kind of interesting. May I share a similar story for when I took my job with Thermo? I got called into an interview in Colorado, and we were in it was the final throes of these interviews, and I'm in this boardroom with the plant manager, and I was going to support him and clinical CCD, clinical something division.
Okay.
I can't remember. Anyway, back in the day. And we're sitting in this.
I can't keep any of them straight, and I work for them now. So.
I can't either. I know. It's the worst. So we're sitting in the boardroom, and there's this assay test sitting on the boardroom table, and a whole bunch of vials and information. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And the guy goes, "Oh, it's actually a test that we create. It's a set of assays for cystic fibrosis." And I said, "Really?" I was like, "Huh, I have a niece and nephew with cystic fibrosis."
Wow.
And he was like, "Yeah." He goes, "This set of tests is called the Silas." And I almost collapsed. My knees got weak, and I looked at him and I said, "You're kidding. My nephew's name is Silas."
I just got goosebumps.
And
like, what?
I'm not kidding. I was like,
you were like,
yes, and this was the end. I want the job. I'll take the job. Thank you. I mean, if it was not a sign to take that job, I do not. To this day, I still get goosebumps telling the story. Mm-hmm. The fact that my nephew with cystic fibrosis is named Silas, and you just told me that assay test is named Silas. Oh, my God. So I tried not to be too saying yes too quickly in the moment.
Exactly. You still have to do your due diligence.
I did. And it was worth it, but I can appreciate the timing. And what we're talking about is the signs and listening to our intuition and paying attention. How has that type of, like you said, you had this debate. Mm-hmm. Was this just a self-debate? Were you bouncing this off of other people in your life? Talk to me about your relationship with decision-making and the use of signs and things like that.
Yeah, it's actually something I really hoped we'd get into today, because I was like, I have so much to say.
Good. I'll hush.
So I think it has taken me a really long time I've always been a relatively intuitive person and like kind of tapped into that side of myself pretty easily. But I went through some things in college years where either being manipulated by people or like kind of misreading certain situations where it got me in trouble. And, I went through probably a several year period when I was in grad school of really struggling to trust my gut instincts and being like, it's gotten you really, under the bus in the past, and maybe you're not good at reading situations, and, maybe you shouldn't trust that part of yourself as much as you have. So it's been this kind of longstanding relationship of I've gone back and forth between leaning into logic and leaning into intuition. And I think I'm finally kind of at this place where I use both of them pretty heavily. I'm also a Capricorn, so like that side of my brain is like, it has to make sense.
Let's put it in a box, people. Well, give us an example. Tell me a time in the past where you wish you had listened to your intuition, if you can.
Where I wish I had listened to my intuition.
Or you, like, if you remember hearing it, but then you ignored it. Like when I took that last job at Allscripts, it was Mises Healthcare. I knew I was going to get the job, but I had an intuitive voice that was like, you don't want this job. Don't take this job. And I completely consciously ignored that voice. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, no, okay. Because as a Capricorn, nope, I already know where we're going to live. I already know what time my kids are going to start classes. And I know that these people, they're humans, they need me. I'm going to be here to help them. And I ended up quitting the job 2.5 years later. And I knew. Now, I don't regret it, but it was some tough going. It seems to me I tend to ignore intuition and end up working a hell of a lot harder than I would have had to if I'd listened to my intuition.
Yeah. So I think I was kind of trying to think back through my own process with that. Like when I was super disconnected from it, I think it was more of like I just wasn't even hearing the things. Like there was no room for me to listen to those signs. And so I just stopped getting them. The less you pay attention to things, the less they come up for you. And the more you pay attention, the more they come up for you. So it's like, I think I just completely kind of shut that part down. And so I didn't even have that voice. And not that like that phase, I don't really feel like, I lost a whole lot in that phase of not listening, but I did, begin to recognize that I wasn't paying attention to the less concrete parts of existence.
And we tend to numb out. We tend to,
right.
Distract and stay busy, and we don't sit still long enough so we can't hear it.
And so that connects very well to kind of what I wanted to talk about in this process, is that I think through that period, what sticks with me the most now is that I just stopped paying attention, and I stopped kind of doing that like constant self-evaluation of, is what I'm doing right now actually aligned with what I want, for one thing, and two, is it aligned with like what I feel like my bigger purpose is, or like what the bigger picture, like how do I want this version to look? And it was so much like, when you're in survival mode where you're putting one step in front of the other and you don't really know where you're going. So that I feel like was kind of that lull that I ended up in for a while, was just sort of going on autopilot for a couple of years. And I think that's like my regret, is that not that I wasted that time, because I still learned things and all of that. And it did bring me, where I'm at today, which I'm very happy with. So it's, I think we all go through our things where we learn about ourselves and the ways that we want to be and the ways that we don't want to be. And that was definitely one of those time periods for me. And just kind of that reminder to keep.
It makes me wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me wonder how intentional, if we could teach our younger selves and teach the younger people today to be much more intentional. But sometimes you just don't know how to be intentional because you haven't lived yet. So.
Right. Like it takes that certain level of awareness that you just have to learn over time. Like you can't cheat that test.
Yeah, you really can't.
Yeah.
And then you have to recognize that you have the ability to say, there's value in this. You talk about this longer version, or, you're really referencing kind of a set of values. So how did you come up with those? Have there been practices that you've put in place, or, I think didn't you do some yoga for a while, or you were, So tell me a little bit about some of your practices.
Yeah. So I actually, I got my yoga teacher training certification during COVID, because that was like another, I feel like in my adult life, we've had so many things that were just like, the world is ending.
I know. Well, welcome to this week. I know. As we watch the apocalyptic floods of Western North Carolina, I'm still in shock. Yeah. Sorry, you knew I'd bring it up. Go ahead.
No, totally on the same page. It's been a tough week in, watching all that happen to you.
But you maximized COVID, is what you're saying.
Yes. COVID was sort of kind of my first, at that point I had finished grad school, and I was of the mindset that I knew like where I was at was most likely temporary in my career, and that I was starting to come to like this realization that I really didn't feel like it was going to be able to support me, and I was going to be able to do justice to what I was doing, just because I had kind of lost inspiration. And then COVID hit, and I went through sort of that first round of, like, what am I doing here?
Who am I? Why am I here?
And I think a lot of people did that. One, because we were forced to spend so much time by ourselves. And two, like, it changed so many things about our daily lives. And we were like, okay, like, how do we live this way now?
Right.
So I think that was sort of the first step. And also like the mortality of it. I mean, like, a lot of people were really scared. So then that also kind of brings in this other level of like, am I living my life the way that I want to?
Good for you.
Yeah, which I don't think I was alone in that. I think a lot of people were kind of having some of those realizations and, realigning with the things that they wanted and their higher purpose, or however you want to say it. And at least thinking about those things.
I think they're thinking about them, but a lot of people spend a lot of time resisting what was, really being in resistance and being upset and scared. And it sounds like you got through that initial, we all kind of were in avoidance. Like we're like, it'll be over soon. We're fine. Until you got faced with, okay, what the hell really just happened here? Sounds like you got over that hump pretty quickly and started making some decisions for yourself. How did you do that? Do you journal, or do you have these self dialogues? Are you like me, crazy woman who talks to herself all the time? Nothing wrong with being crazy. Sorry. Don't cancel me.
No, I love it. To be completely honest, I don't really do a lot of like those kind of more, I hesitate to call them mainstream, but like the common sort of self-practice type stuff. I think yoga, like you mentioned, was a big thing for me of just like learn or like kind of remembering to turn inward for guidance. That one of the big lessons they teach is that like you're the only one that knows exactly what's going on in your body. And the teacher could be guiding you in certain ways and have that expectation of you, but it's your responsibility to yourself to do what feels right. And so I think that lesson kind of, bleeds into everything that I try to bring to my own life now. And I feel like it was always in there somewhere, from being a kid. But I think, as we grow up and face cultural expectations and norms and the things that we see going on around us, we lose touch with that a little bit. So I
think that's the hero's journey. I think that's what we're supposed to do. So you're born knowing you're enough. Maybe we do depends on your belief system, but maybe we bring some historical memory in our cellular makeup and some lineage, belief systems that can affect how we show up on this planet. But typically society just kind of brainwashes us to believe and fit ourselves into the game. And then if you're not either quitting your job or having an existential crisis by the time you're 40, then you're not really on the right journey. You've numbed out enough to avoid it. But if you aren't too numbed out and you start listening, then you remember your wholeness. And I think practices like yoga are pretty powerful. And if people can stop looking at yoga as this activity, like I go to the class, I sit on the mat, I listen to the teacher, and they do exactly what you just said. They go inward. I like the phrase that always stayed with me from all my yoga over the years was, stay on your mat. It's your mat. Stay on your mat. Because I came home once and I told my husband, I was like, oh my God, that girl was doing headstands and blah, blah. And he goes, I was like, I felt so inadequate. He said, I don't think yoga is supposed to be competitive. And I was like, exactly. I'm feeling very competitive. I'm feeling compared.
Like when you're at the gym and you're like running on a treadmill next to someone else and you're like, oh, we're racing now.
Now, I know. So it takes some practice to trust that you can go inward. What advice would you give as a teacher now certified? Are you still teaching yoga or just have your certification, or what's going on there?
Yeah. So I never actually got into teaching. It was thing. I was kind of in this phase of trying to figure out, what direction I wanted to go in next. And when I did training, I was like, I'm going to teach, I'm going to open up my own studio. It's going to be amazing. Like, who knows what's going to happen? That obviously went on a different track from there. But I do think that's something like I have tried to help myself grow into too in a lot of the things that I've explored. So like, I'll get back to your initial question in a second about.
That's fine. Take it, girl.
But so I think if there's sort of one thing that I'm like really proud of the ways that I've changed in the past, like maybe 5 years, is that really sitting in being open to things. And if I'm inspired by something, follow that. Like, don't pay attention to, not don't pay attention, but like notice in the corner the reasons why it might not work. But, use that as a voice of how to prepare instead of a voice of don't try it. And that's, I think, kind of one of the biggest things, like themes that's coming up in my life right now. Like I'm doing something at work where no one has seen anything like what I'm trying to make happen. And so I'm talking to people about, these ideas that I trust. And And I'm like, I'm not here to, hear that this won't work, or like, you can't do this, or it's never been done before, or whatever. I'm here talking to you about this because I want to know your perspective, the things to look out for, and, how to make it better. Because it is something that, higher level leadership are going to be like, absolutely not. So like, how do I kind of smooth that into the situation?
Right. Taking in the data. I mean, we have to have, as I always joke, just the facts, ma'am. If you can give me the facts as they're currently known, then you can move from the facts, the realism of the moment, to what might be possible. And that's where kind of the magic comes in. I mean, If you can think it, you can create it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they need someone to push the envelope like that. So I'm really proud of you for having the confidence to take it all in and continue to push forward.
Thank you. And it's not all me. Like, there are multiple people involved in this. So it's it's a really exciting thing that I'm, feeling very deeply tied to right now. And that's kind of had me internally thinking a lot about, like, what makes me comfortable being this person that's like, I don't care that it's never been done before. Let's give it a shot.
Don't you find that fascinating that some people have that ability to go there and others would never even consider it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are so in there. Well, I don't know. I had the idea, but I'm not going to ask. I'm always fascinated by the different personalities. I mean, obviously we're two Capricorns we're singing to each other's choir. So Capricorn personalities are like, why not? Let's make it happen. Bias for action. Let's get it done. Yeah. Oh my God. I just find it fascinating though. I mean, like, the average performer, when I worked at GE, back at the day, GE had least effective performers, middle 70, and then the top performers. And I used to go to bed at night, and I happened to be overachiever in the top performers. And it was a lot of pressure. And I remember thinking, I just want to be a middle 70.
That's exactly
like, how do they do it?
Can I just be normal?
I just want to be normal. Please, someone help me not want to keep working and overachieving. I mean, when you changed your mind about that, I mean, because you had that Capricorn gene going when you were like, oh, I'm going to get my yoga certification. I'm going to have my own studio. So what switched for you to make the change? You needed money? You had to go get another job? I mean, what happened?
Okay, so that was when COVID came through. And then shortly after that was when everything started happening with my aunt. So I went through, doing yoga teacher training and being really inspired and like being kept up at night, going through sequences to teach in my head and that kind of thing. So I was very inspired that was the way that I wanted to interact with people and help people. And I do feel like I have a sort of kind of service mentality, and I want to make sure I stay aligned with that. But at the time I was like, I want to be, hands-on with people, and I want to interact directly with the people and be able to see them grow and, find validation for myself in that. And then everything happened with my aunt, and that completely changed my perspective. And I was like, no, I want to have a more far-reaching impact. And, there are still ups and downs in like big pharma and all of that. And so it's still a mixed bag for sure.
Well, I think you said something pretty profound to even reflect on, which is, I wanted to make an impact by helping people. I wanted to know I was doing that for them. And I've been playing a lot lately with okay, and then what? Yeah. And then, so why is that important to you? Are we still looking externally for our purpose and value to try to prove to others that we're worthy? Or could you, you know what I mean? Like you had to realign it to different levels of purpose, but honestly, you just being here is purpose enough. So I don't know.
That's something I have a really hard time with. So I would say that probably deserves some journaling.
I think that does.
Yeah. And probably for many more people than just myself, but
that's why we're here. That is why we do this podcast. I want people thinking about that, and then what? And then what? So,
Or like
so I cure. Say that again.
Like the why, like something I was going through in my head last night as I was thinking about the stuff that we might talk about today is and this maybe fits into your topic of, the things that I do to sort of like question myself and kind of figure out what is important to me, is that I was on this thought train imagining something, a topic that we were maybe going to talk about. And I was picturing you, which is very funny that it's now coming up, basically just like repeatedly asking me why. And so like I would tell you something and you'd be like, but why?
Oh my God, you totally manifested this.
And I did get to a point where I was like, I don't know. And so, just even I think getting as you're internally processing things, and that is something that I like to do, is asking yourself why. And that, it's like talking with your inner child, and they're like, but why, but why, but why? And sometimes with kids, we don't know the answers. And so
right.
It's just kind of wild to have that like internal dialogue, I guess, and be like, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe we'll figure it out.
That's right. And sometimes the answer is just because it feels good, just because that's what I want to do right this minute.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to see your path and take it, as people are listening, to recognize that you can be fully in, you can be completely doing something and then change your mind because it no longer aligns with what matters most to you. So knowing what matters most to you becomes the ultimate goal, because our behavior somehow aligns to that value, right? And it sounds to me like when you ultimately shifted, you were looking at the values of, solving some world problems that were perhaps not supporting your aunt and her experience as well as it might have, or, giving people with your aunt's circumstance access to alternatives and to traditional medicine.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of fits into this whole bigger picture thing. And especially because, at work, I lead a group of strategists in cell and gene therapy technologies and how to successfully set up trials for that. And my aunt had gone to Mexico to be able to do something sort of similar for her cancer. And, because there was nothing available and nothing approved. And so, even, a few years down the road, we're already seeing huge jumps in that area and so much more attention and focus and that kind of thing. So that feels really good. To even down to that point of like the type of therapy that she thought would be most meaningful to help research move along in that space.
Well, think about the power of if we either we have free will or it's all predestined. I really do struggle sometimes with these big concepts because I'm like, well, you maybe that was the gift your aunt gave by sacrificing her life at that age in order for you to be inspired to go work with these individuals to make a change in the world so more people could be supported. And that was her sacrifice. Who knows? But I can tell you something. Life is a lot more fun when you come up and frame your life story to have impact like that and to have purpose-driven action to then point to and say, this is what I've decided that meant. Mm-hmm. Here's what I decided the why was for me. And here's how I'm going to take that and look at the unlimited possibilities that I can now apply this insight or motivation or inspiration to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am very much in agreement with that. I think in a slightly different way. Like I'm not like a religious person or anything, but I hugely respect the people who have a story that they hold on to that helps them live their lives better and sometimes treat other people better, but not always.
Yeah. Sometimes that can take into a control factor.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not what I'm here for today. But
Understood.
I do very much align with like, we tell ourselves stories every day about why things happen. And in certain ways, it makes things more meaningful and it makes our existence more meaningful. And if you latch on to that in a certain way, like where's the harm in that?
There is no harm in it.
Mm.
I had an argument once with somebody a long time ago, and they were like, well, you're just rationalizing it. And I said, well, I can either be a victim to it, I can be really pissed off about it, or I can just rationalize it and move on. And I can't live in that catabolic negative space without self-destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to rationalize. And I always tell people, at a minimum, I need you to rationalize your circumstance so you can choose to move forward without suffering.
So I'm going to ask,
because go ahead.
I want to ask you why right there, because I was also having, a little thing about this conversation last night.
Okay, I've invited the psychic and the intuitive onto the show, ladies and gentlemen. Please ask.
But this concept of that I think it is a huge tool to try to make sense of the things that we observe and then use those stories in a constructive way. But what if we didn't have to do that? What if we didn't have to lean on that to be able to, like you were saying, let it go or move on or, transmute it into something else? What if we could just let it be what it is and, still do our thing in a certain level? Obviously, it doesn't apply to every situation, but
actually you can, and people do. And we do it in areas of our lives that we don't even realize we're doing it. So, I mean, I don't analyze why I'm breathing. I don't analyze the sun coming up.
They're like, well, right? I'm here.
Right. But I think that everyone is in and out of these, and I talk about this energy leadership concept a lot because you're constantly perceiving your world, but you can only perceive your world based on your past life experience.
Right.
So I could never see your world the same way because I had different experiences. Mm-hmm. And although we're both human, we're seeing and viewing and like filtering what we're experiencing every day through our own sunglasses, our own lenses. But when we take off the sunglasses and we recognize that there are, to your point, you like to be open-minded, you want to be available to what's possible. When I take the sunglasses off of my life experience, then I can create a conscious opportunity. And I can be in a practice of not making something that historically triggered me because of my sunglasses. With practice, I can at some point in the future notice, the guy cut me off in traffic and I no longer even notice. Mm-hmm. But it takes conscious practice and to be aware of my autonomic nervous system's reaction in order to learn how to soothe myself and be calm or distracted, slow down, guy needs to cut in front of me. Oh, but I'm still thinking about this joyful dinner I had last night with my friends. Yeah. Right? Versus the stress of some future meeting I might be late to because this guy cut me off. Where the mind goes, energy flows. So yes, it's absolutely possible. And it's simultaneous. Right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That actually brings up another thing that I do want to talk about is this. I feel like getting back to this theme of the things that have brought me to where I am now, especially the kind of internal growth I've had in the past couple of years, which I feel like is probably a little bit why my mom was like, you should interview Dev.
Yes.
That I have really practiced leaving room within myself to hold conflicting things at the same time. So when we consider that, these ideas we have in our heads about, for example, emotions, that you can't have room for anger and joy at the same time. And you can, or, grief and gratitude, or it's, I think, a whole other level of kind of emotional evolution where you can recognize that you can hold space for both of them at the same time. And I think the same thing applies for ideas too. And for example, what's going on with work and the fact that I'm trying to make something happen that has never happened before. And so it's
mm-hmm.
Okay, there are reasons why it could fail, why it's not a good idea, why whatever, but there are a lot of, supporting reasons for it too. So how do we balance those things in order to make something come of it? And I think that theme sort of applies to a lot of different things.
So how are you balancing that? How do you do that?
I don't really know that it's a science for me. I think I try to recognize, like when those things are coming up, and because I have not always been great at processing emotion, especially when they're like very deep, very strong ones. Anger was a big thing that like I always just kind of thought I was like a very level-headed person, which I still think I am to a certain degree, but it doesn't mean that like I never felt those things. And
Oh, sure.
So like even as a kid, I never really had like huge temper tantrums. And, my mom and I never really like fought a lot when I was growing up. So I think anger and that like rise and like I just didn't really know how to process. And so when it came up, I was like, what do I do with this?
Right.
And that was another thing that was coming up a lot with my aunt, in that I was obviously very sad about the situation and, grieving the situation even before she passed, when we knew things looked pretty bad. And I was really angry about, why was this happening? And she was, a person who in her own ways had a lot of positive impact on. She was a dentist. She volunteered a lot. Like, she did mission stuff. And so I'm like, why, again, telling ourselves these stories and making sense of things. And why is this happening? And I was so angry. So I think that was kind of one of the bigger times that I feel like I've dealt with that. And at the time I was like, this is the only thing I can feel. Like, I can't feel other things because this is taking up so much room inside of me. And I'm
glad you said that. Yeah.
As I grew through that a little, you can learn to, when you notice something else kind of creeping in, okay, I'm going to focus on that for a little bit. And I think that also helps with the grieving process too, is that, you can't just be in grief all the time. And there's guilt around that too. I mean, guilt that makes sense. Like, you feel bad about when you start living your life again and when you start feeling happy about certain things. And so it's obviously a lot of complex things. But yeah, what were you going to say?
No, that's exactly right. And everything you just described comes with its own interpretive label, such as, well, then you feel guilty about not grieving enough. Well, because then you made not grieving some sort of betrayal against the person who's no longer here. Or, I hear you. And I'm going through a divorce, and I'm carrying two storylines. And one storyline is, wow, thank goodness, our relationship showed up for both of us exactly the way it was supposed to. And it served us well, and now it needs to end. And on the other hand, I'm like super angry and I feel betrayed. And I'm sure John does too. We both are like, it's not what we wanted. And we're mad at ourselves. We're disappointed with each other. And then on the other hand, we're like, but wait, it's exactly what we said it was supposed to be, which I carry that type of thinking a lot more. Mm-hmm. But in my attempt to hold on to that storyline, to feel better, quote unquote, and to move forward and rationalize, the other voice just kept coming in. Mm-hmm. So I had to sit with it. Yeah. I had to allow the emotion. And that is something that people have a really hard time doing. And it sounds like you went back and forth, right? Like any normal person would. Mm-hmm. But they can be held simultaneously, and they have to be, because you are energy in motion, emotion. You're constantly going to be having all the feels. The power source here is where the mind goes. And you can, I'll just be normal. Like, I'll just give you, I'll be normal. I'm like, getting ready for Devon, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so sad. And then it will just stop. Mm-hmm. It will take less than a minute. And I'm like, oh, right. Of course, that was that little moment of sadness. Okay, next.
Yep.
But I have to let them come in, those little bubbles. And it happens a lot with people going through grief. Anger has been a big one. And then dissecting the emotion, the grief, is the grief really about the loss of your aunt, or is the grief about your loss? It's not really about her dying and she was a good person. It was about, you miss her. You wanted her in your life. You wanted more of her. And then there she is. We try to, talking off the cuff here, but we try to make it about, oh, she was a good person. Well, I don't care if she was a homeless lady. She died, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, she was a good person, but God or whoever, I'm not religious either, but whoever is helping these soul contracts make their decisions doesn't really give a shit whether you volunteered for 42 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They don't, It doesn't matter. You are enough, whether you're homeless on the street or you are Mother Teresa. I believe that. I don't know. Argue. Go for it. Your turn.
No. It's something, I feel like that came up a little bit earlier and I wanted to talk about it, but we moved on to something else. But
Squirrel.
I love them. Where this concept, and this was the impetus behind this should be a journal prompt kind of thing of like,
right,
being enough without being enough, and like just existing, like you're allowed and should just do that, and that what is this life that we get, and I think for me, I don't really know like where this came from, but a lot of the kind of the struggle that I have internally is finding that self-worth and detaching it from the things that I feel like I bring to the world. And like, it can be enough just to be walking down the street with my dog and smile at somebody. And like, that can be it, And reminding myself that sometimes, but I also do think it's a balance that like, I do want to make the world a better place. And that only happens when people have a vision and are committed and driven and, have that dedication. And again, kind of coming back to the story of like, where does it come from and does it really matter? And does the story behind it matter? Sometimes, when, it becomes a destructive thing to the person or, when we struggle with self-worth things, then obviously, yes, I think there is a problem there. But for the most part, I think if you can balance, I don't know, like I'm proud of myself when I perform well with things. And like, sometimes that's a great thing and sometimes it's not a great thing.
Well, I think it's balance to your point. I mean, when I know I'm enough, then if something doesn't go the way I originally wanted it to go, like an outcome at work, then the loss of that or the misstep there doesn't cause me angst. I might be like, oh, that's not what we'd hoped for, but I can continue to move forward. That's it. Does it destroy me? Does it hurt me? Am I so connected and attached to it that I can't be okay with the outcome that might not have been what I wanted?
It's like
I think that's it. It's attachment.
Yeah. The detachment factor is like, you can be committed all you want, but like detaching from the outcome to a certain degree where like I've put everything I possibly could into this and I'm proud of that no matter what happens. And so that's kind of the space where like I try to live, even though sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, where, what you put into it in the day-to-day matters and is a good thing. And whatever comes of that, whether you're saying, like, is it preordained or do we have free will or all of that? Like, some things happen and some things don't. And sometimes there's bigger reasons and maybe there's not. Maybe we're all just out here rolling around doing our things. I don't know. But
and I don't think we have to know. I think the most important thing to do is to know what matters most to you and your values and to live to that. And if it makes you feel good, then it's okay.
Yeah.
And most people's values don't include, intentional destruction of other people, or some people are concerned about living their life the way they want to because they don't want to be perceived as selfish or doing something that isn't service oriented, sitting and staring at the view for hours on end doesn't make Nicoa a bad person, but does Nicoa want to tell everybody she spent 8 hours the other day when she could have been volunteering to help the people of Western North Carolina? Yeah, probably not going to publicize that, but I might. And to be okay with that is kind of can you just be okay with being?
Right.
And it sounds like you're coming to a space and have already much sooner than most people in their lives to recognize that you can't get this thing called life wrong.
I mean,
and you
maybe
just
don't
keep
like kill
doing it.
people and stuff, but
Right. We don't want to kill people, but some spiritual beliefs are there's value in all. Right. So there's value in all, from murder to orgasm. There you go. I said it on pub. Said it out loud. Made Devon chuckle.
I love it.
Let me bring something up though. I'll switch.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing about attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a client message me from Western North Carolina, and it was as if she were whispering in the text. And she said to me, I have to tell you, this has been really cleansing. You're the only one I can say this to right now. And I said, it's really cleansing for everybody, whether they can see it right now or not. And I think that, I'm always trying to find value. So, because otherwise I suffer too much. So maybe that's my own issue. But I do prefer to, and to your point, can't we just all say whatever happens, happens, and here we are? That's kind of where I am most of the time. I would say I'm there 75% of the time. And I can say, wow, I wonder what the value was in this massive event, right? What is the earth trying to say? What are these individuals affected going to now do with their lives? Which ones of them will be like, wow, you know what? I was sick of that life anyway. Right? Thank God the house got washed away. We're going to take this whatever little bit of money we have and we're going to go start somewhere else. Or noticing people's reactions under stress. Wow. I mean, there's value. There could be value. I find that fascinating.
I'll agree with that too. And I think to a certain point, and obviously like this is not the same situation, but like when Florence hit Wilmington and everything was shut down for a month, and it was this sort of like, it brings you back to a very simple existence. And as much as it's terrifying, that these people are just trying to survive, and some of them are dying or have passed already. And it's, this like, we as, a progressive culture have come so far from just living and what that means, that it can be kind of refreshing to have something like that happen and just be like, okay, the only thing I can focus on is what's happening right now and what I can do today. And
yes,
it really has that impact to kind of like, and even someone who's not going through it, I noticed that in myself, that like, I'm talking to my family who live up there, and that it brings you just back into a different headspace about, what is important and what can I do today? And again, aligning with the person that you want to be and all of that. So
what if we could all just do that today, no matter our circumstance, right? Mm-hmm. So what does matter most to you guys, you listeners out there? Have you ever sat down? I mean, we talked about mergers and acquisitions at the beginning of this, and cultural integration and branding. We rarely do that for our own lives. Mm-hmm. We know how to do it really well in the corporate world, but I could tell you, I probably would still be in my first marriage if we learned how to do that from day one. I'm not kidding. I mean, we were together 27 years, but let me be clear. My attempts at later in life, attempting to create, like, what are our values as a family, got a lot of eye rolls. What matters most to us? So I don't know. Let's go eat tacos. I'm like, okay, guys. So you can't change other people, but you can at least change yourself. So I invite our listeners to write down, what are your values? And there's a great book by Dan Zadra that I love to advertise. He owes me. He totally owes me. Dan Zadra. It's called 5. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And a lot of people kind of like, 5-year plan. I'm like, well, yeah, but I write in pencil, so I change it every year anyway.
And that's such a cool thing, to give yourself permission to change your mind. And I think that,
oh yeah,
like I am a Capricorn that doesn't have a 5-year plan. And so, I think that has been helpful for me in, like, I have a general idea, but I don't break it down by steps and stuff. And I think that is really helpful with giving myself permission to be like, is where I'm at right now still in alignment with where I want to be? And that helps kind of bring me back into checking in more often because I don't have a set plan.
Right. And it's really, and the more powerful piece too, is that it just requires you to pause and reflect on your way of being. What is my way of being and my legacy? How do I want to be perceived? How do I want to leave, that aligns with me feeling good? What matters most to me? What is my mission, my vision? And I can change it. Who are the people that are influencing me right now? If we don't pause, this is kind of the point. You've had moments in your career and in your life where you were forced to pause,
right?
Or you gave yourself permission to pause and then reassess. So really, permission is what I hear when you tell me your story. I gave myself permission to make a change.
And see, the way I see it is that circumstances forced me to. I mean, to a certain degree, it was okay, I should tap into this. But I mean, those periods of time were followed by events that made me think about things differently. Whereas, in an ideal sort of self-progression timeline, you would do that on your own and be like, if this is my last year on earth, am I living the way I want to? And sometimes, checking in that way without something catastrophic happening in your life is a really powerful tool.
Well, I think the catastrophic experiences that we're observing on globally right now should be jerking a knot in us, to your point.
Yeah.
So, instead of sitting around going, oh, thank God that's not me, which I spent a lot of time thinking about that. We just moved my mother from Western North Carolina. I'm on the water. I know damn well I could be just like those people on the news. Moving towards, okay, let's do a life check. Is this where I still want to be? Can I live here fear-free, right? Knowing that I could also be strong and resilient and come back to the basics if I had to. And really aligning my way of being so that I can live the life I want and I love. And it sounds like to me that you're really loving your life right now. Tell us a little bit about outside of the career space.
Yeah.
What's fun for you? How are you finding joy and laughter and fun in your life?
So it's actually, I would say probably this past year, the beginning of this year, I've really sort of switched into more of a mindset of trying to find my inspiration. That earlier this year, I became friends with someone who I feel like I've learned a lot from in just, conversations and life perspective and that kind of thing. And they came to visit Wilmington and I think maybe had been once, but didn't explore all that much or whatever. And in, seeing it from someone else's perspective, I was like, I'm not inspired by living here anymore. And I love the beach, sure. But it wasn't it was really kind of a hard realization that I was like, maybe this isn't the place for me anymore, which is not really a headspace I had ever been in since moving there. Because, I was there for college and then early career, and I had, my mom lived there, and I had built myself this beautiful network of, career, friends, whatever, all the things. And I loved that about living there. And then all of a sudden, something was just kind of and I was like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, good.
and so, but I do think it kind of comes back to that the inspiration thing. And, you can love something without feeling inspired by it. And that I sort of left room for that. And I was like, okay, well, what does inspire me right now? So I spent a little bit of time kind of throwing around different ideas and exploring different places. And, so that was part of why I ended up leaving Wilmington. And so getting into the whole, joy, fun, whatever, that's something that I'm really trying to build more into my life right now, because I do think it has been something that's been on, left on the back burner most of the time. And I'm an artist on the side too, and I haven't created anything just creative in a very long time. And so that's something that I'm trying to tap into again, also in just, like doing things for the intrinsic value of them. It doesn't have to change the world. It can just be what I feel like slapping paint on, or I don't know, just, doing more things for fun and just for the experience and the exploration and
the aesthetics of it all, just to have the experience and not needing to share it or just to experience it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's kind of the whole point. I'm really glad that you're saying that.
Kind of the whole point. And I'm like,
it's the whole point. Yeah. Whether it's work or play or, washing the dishes. Can you embrace it and immerse yourself in it to where it's fulfilling and satisfying? And because, go ahead.
Yeah. So like, even to the point of like trying to reframe the things that we tell ourselves of like, maybe you hate cleaning and every time you clean, you're like, oh, this is like such a pain in the butt. I hate, okay, either like change something in your situation. So maybe you get a housekeeper and you don't have to deal with that anymore. And like, I was in that phase too, where I was like, I've never had someone clean my house before. And then I started getting someone to do it. And I was like, how have I not done this for so long? This is amazing.
Oh my God. Right. Oh, and I had to cancel my cleaner for so long after John and I got separated because of just cash flow, and not kidding you. Today, I finally said, I was like, Linda, you've got to come back and help me. I was like,
but, granted, it's a huge privilege to be able to do something like that. But, getting back to the narrative of like changing how you phrase something in your head, instead of being like, oh, this is such a, pain in the butt that I don't want to have to deal with, maybe tapping into the, I have this beautiful house that I get to live in that I have the privilege of cleaning and keeping up after, and that this is a part of my life, and bringing that energy into it instead of the, I don't want to do this. It's just something else on the list, and like all of that stuff, which I feel like is something that you had talked about before. And I remember it specifically in paying bills, like a financial thing.
Yep.
That you were like, I get to have all of these things that I have to pay for.
Yep. I was going to see if one of the ones I recently did, I write thank you every time I pay a bill. Yeah. I write thank you on the checks when I use checks. And even if I have auto draft, I throw away the paper that comes in the mail if there is one, or I still mentally say it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we have the power to shift. And this is important not only for individuals living their best life by design, but also for leaders. Their responsibility leading teams and leading others, even if they don't have official direct reports, is to be able to draw the line back to that purpose like we talked about. Mm-hmm. When I'm washing the dishes, it's got a big story, the long game story of why those dishes being clean make me happy and create my life by design, right? Whether I'm washing them or the cleaning lady's washing them. Usually I'm the one, but not this week. I'm very excited. She's coming back. It might be once every 3 months, but I'm just like, I saved my money. Mm-hmm. Well, we are all powerful, and we can create and design and experience this any way we want. We cannot get it wrong. You have role modeled such a beautiful example of learning some of these skills sooner. And may I ask your age?
I'm 31. Yeah.
So you're 31. I'm 55. I wish I knew what you know when I was 31. So we have, everybody listening, there is hope in the world. The generations behind us watched us role model ways they don't want to do it, and a lot of ways they do want to do it. And I think they're taking the best of it, just like we did from our parents, and we need to trust the future. I'm not afraid, and I am even more reassured every person I meet that's younger than me, because I know we're going to be able to turn this world around for the better.
Yeah.
And at the same time,
kids too, like,
right. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really, at the same time, I don't think the world is bad. So it's just an experience. Yeah. I think I probably can only say that because I'm not afraid to die. If I was afraid to die, I mean, again, it's back to attachment, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's probably another planet we could go. Okay. All right, Devon. What else do you want to talk about before we hang up? We've had such a lovely conversation.
I know. I feel like we would never run out of things to talk about. I'd made some notes. I want to like skim through it really quick. But honestly, I think we kind of hit on most of this.
It's because you manifested it. You totally visualized everything we were going to talk about. Did you know I was going to wear this outfit? Did you see me wearing my glasses? Like, I want to know what the visualization was like.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't so much of like visualization. Just I don't know. Maybe it was just a projection, and it is what it is.
Well, like energy attracts like energy, so I'm not surprised. We were both tuned into each other before today, and I'm really honored that you said yes. I love your mama, so that means I love you. Mm-hmm. And I just can't wait to meet you in person. I can't believe we haven't met yet.
I know. It is kind of crazy to me. But yeah, I was so excited to be here too.
Last question I ask all of my clients before we hang up. What is the one thing you want to celebrate the most about yourself before we hang up, Devon?
At risk of kind of sounding cliche.
Go for it.
I do think, and this is part of why I wanted to come talk with you on this podcast specifically today, is that I think, and I value this a lot about myself, in that I'm, faced with whatever is going on in my life, and I create what I want out of it. And, whether that's a good thing, whether that's a bad thing, I don't think it really matters, that I'm able to sort of create the things that I want when I realize that's what I want. You know what I mean? So the step there is really just kind of checking in and being like, where do I want to be and how do I get there? And that I have this crazy level of confidence that I can make it happen.
It's not crazy at all. And you believe in you. You believe in you. And that's all we have to do. My dad always said it. Don't forget the Nicoa factor.
Yep.
And Devon knows. Devon's got the Devon factor. And he shared that story when he was in his deepest moments of panic about his business and money and payroll. And then he said, I woke up the next day and I thought, well, I haven't really applied the Paul factor yet. And when he told me that story, he would bring it up again. And I just think that's what you just summarized. Mm-hmm. That belief in yourself. And that comes with reassurance. And there's, we could talk about that for another hour and a half. Exactly. So I celebrate that. All right, my friend. I look forward to running into you in Durham or wherever you are. And next time you're in Wilmington, maybe we could actually have a real coffee with Nicoa.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for saying yes.
She'd love that.
Oh, we definitely have to. Do you know how many times I resisted texting her over the last couple of days? Because I was going to say, I'm going to talk to Devon. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to bring mama into it. I'm going to let it just be between the two of us. I'm surprised she didn't text me.
Oh, yeah.
She's probably waiting to see what you say, right?
Maybe. Who knows?
Well, go off and make sure that you continue to push forward with possibility in your life. I'm quite impressed with you. I'm not surprised at all. And I'm excited to see what happens next with you in your life. Why don't we do this? Why don't we plan on talking a year from now? And then you can give us an update on all the things. Yes.
Okay. Well, wait. So we have 2 minutes left. If we're going to do this thing in another year, what's something that you want to be different in your life? A year from now.
Oh my God. Well, you know what I'm going to say, because in 1 year, in 1 year from now, I will have been officially divorced. And honestly, I want to not be thinking about, a relationship with anybody other than with myself. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean I won't be in a relationship with somebody else, but I want to be in such a loving relationship with myself that a lover is just going to be icing on the cake. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Was that TMI?
No. It's really funny that like that was where you went with it, because that's kind of where mine is at too, but a little bit opposite. Like I feel like I've spent, the past 5 or so years really focusing on the things that make me me and building who I am and becoming so strong in that. And that kind of where I'm trying to focus now is being open to other people and, like you say, like attracts like, and really opening up to anything else that comes into my life. So maybe a year from now, we'll see what happens.
Let's put our hands on our hearts and give our hearts permission to open up to that. Yeah, because that's really being open-hearted and allowing somebody in. Mm-hmm. So, and we will only attract where we vibrate. So I take full responsibility for all my past attractions. So I am a different woman now, and in a year from now, I'll be an even different woman.
Yes, ma'am.
So you will too. And I thank you so much. I send you off. Happy designing, my friend.
Thank you. You too. Love you, Nicoa.
Love you too.
Thanks for joining us for a caffeinated conversation. Subscribe to Coffee with Nicoa for more stories from people living a life by design. You can also find inspiration on Instagram. Just follow Coffee with Nicoa. And check out our website, coffeewithnicoa.com. And that's Nicoa, Nicoa. We look forward to talking with you soon, and enjoy your coffee between now and then.
Guess what, y'all? I published a book. Your Life by Design, a Coffee with Nicoa self-care coaching journal, is now available on Amazon. This interactive journal begins and ends with powerful queries, guiding you on a quest for the kind of life by design you don't need a vacation from. I've included an in-depth look at strategic self-care to empower you and hold you accountable to really getting to know your true self. It's time to prioritize you. Use the link in the show notes to buy yours today.